What's going on, guys? And as always, thank you for joining us on the platform, the Life Unit Inc., where we focus specifically on this show to highlight other nonprofits, advocates, change makers, positive influencers, etc. I definitely got to shout out the Commonwealth of VA fam. I'm down here in Georgia, but if you know my history, you know a little bit about my past. I did my time in Virginia. And hey, from down here, I'm rooting them on. I do believe that Virginia is setting a precedent, a tone, and we're seeing a whole lot of unity and we're seeing strength when that happens. So salute to them. And that's kind of the segue into the introduction to my guest this evening. Advocate, freedom fighter, I don't know, however you want to label the gentleman, but he's somebody that I got the opportunity to speak to about maybe 2 weeks ago. And it was like I knew the guy. And I always appreciate people like that. I like to highlight, I don't know, it's like the blue collar people to me or something, the human people, right? Which is another perfect segue. This gentleman, Taj, his organization is called the Humanization Project. And it's focusing on, and he's going to say it way better than I am, but basically elevating impacted voices, the justice impacted voices, or elevating the voices of those that have been impacted by incarceration, to basically form like common ground so policies can shift and be changed, and we can have conversation with people that are across the aisle, because a lot of times that's the linchpin that's needed for things to fall into place. We need common ground to be seen. So that's why I wanted to bring him up here. He's going to definitely speak about a little bit more of what he's doing, including other ways that he's advocating that may or may not be outside of the box. So without further ado, and we're getting comments, positive vibes only, says hello, everyone. Hello to you, and hello, yes, to everyone. And without further ado, let me bring my guest up here. Taj, how you doing, sir?
Oh, I am so happy, Chris. We had a big victory yesterday in legislative reform in Virginia, and it was a complicated victory. Then we had another big victory this morning, and this stuff is it's always nuanced and technical and stuff. But the thing that has me really excited is the fact that, like you said, our community has really come together more and more every year recently, and the humanization is proud to be part of that. I always like the cheesy line of "we're building unity in the community," but I remember being inside, and actually, you and I were in the same system at the same time, and a lot of overlap, never in the same place, but. There's a lot of false information, a lot of rumors, a lot of people just you're isolated inside, and something I kept thinking was, if we could just get everybody who cared, everybody who knew the members of this community, to speak about them as human beings and have everybody on the same page, we would be able to do a lot more than what we've done. And that's kind of been something that a bunch of us, not just the Humanization Project, but we've been doing for years. And this year, I got out last June, a recipient of some of the second chances that we're always all promoting. And you yourself also a second chance recipient in various ways. Many of us are, and trying to take that and run with it. And the Humanization Project, the ultimate point you hit on this, is humanization. And I always like to tell people, if everybody knew Justice, John, Joe, Deontay, Sandra, insert name here, like I did, then everybody would want justice reform like I do. Because what I realized was, when I got locked up, all the data in the world that I'd always told all my family, because I was doing this from a different perspective, from a scientific perspective before working for reform, I always told them they cared, they understood, but it wasn't a thing that resonated with them. And then when they saw my personal experience, and then I introduced them to other people inside, and they got to know people as human beings, all of a sudden it was something they were going to vote on, not just say, okay, yeah, I agree. And that
Right.
was like, oh, we need to
Right.
humanize.
Let me
And that's what we've been doing, and it's a way to have our voices, those closest to the problem are closest to the solution, that whole thing. And I know you've mentioned that in other capacities at other times, like, who knows better what the problems are and the ways to actually fix them in a way that impacts actual lives, not just pieces of paper and statutes and all of this, than the people who are part of this experience, and who's going to care more. So that's what we've been trying to do.
Right. I want to. I definitely want to get into the humanization project because there's so many faces I see through social media that if people knew the stories, because they might just see them in certain rooms or in certain posts, but I see some of these guys, and these guys, they survive some things, 25 years and things like this. I'm seeing different organizations, not necessarily people that have been incarcerated, but like the SIP. I'm always seeing them, always out front. I'm seeing Sheba Williams, all these different organizations, Paul Taylor. Like you said, it's so many different people. And you chimed in about victories, or a couple of wins. And somebody asked, he said, "What were the victories that you spoke of in the beginning when you first started going in?"
Yeah. I don't want to get too in the weeds. I will say, if you want to get in the weeds on justice reform legislation in Virginia, where we actually have been on a roll this semester. Listen to me, I'm sounding like a professor still. This session so far, every Sunday night, the Humanization Project at our Facebook page. The Humanization Project is our Facebook page. We do a Facebook Live at 8 p.m. every Sunday night. And that is justice reform legislative update. So it's just the community coming together and us having some people who are working on the ground in the General Assembly, talking the details of like what happened, what does it mean, and like really getting in the weeds on it, but in human terms, so that the impacted community can understand, because this stuff gets real technical and we don't want to lose people. Actually, I just found out, to that point, and relating to one of these victories, Ray Cousins, Delegate Ray Cousins, who is a new member of the House of Delegates in Virginia, and just an absolute champion for this. She's the chief patron of the House Second Look bill, which is just like, I think people have probably heard about DC. New Mexico just recently did a Second Look bill, but that's where, after you have a really long sentence, after a particularly long period of time, in this case, it's 15, 20, or 25 years, you have the opportunity to have the sentence reviewed by the courts again. Because in most states, once you get a long sentence, and you of all people know this,
Yeah.
you're hit, right?
Yeah.
Like, as we say, like, you just got to suffer, and then there's no incentive to do better. There's no accountability. You're just locked in a box and dealing. And a few of us, not even a few, many people still find ways to improve themselves anyway. But if we really want a safer society, if we really want stronger communities, if we really want people to be better, and if we really want to honor the victims of these crimes, it's by encouraging people to do better, right? And so that's what this does. It just opens that up for everybody to, not everybody to get out. We understand that not everybody has devoted themselves to that. But what we want is for everybody to have the chance to be considered, not just on that moment that happened 30, 20 years ago, whatever, but to be considered as a human being based upon what they've done since then. And that's one of the crucial things about this Second Look bill, is that it requires that the courts not just examine whether this person should potentially have a new sentence, but also they have to examine a list of, I think it's 11, but don't quote me on that, about that many specific factors that are post conviction or separate from the conviction, things that are like, these are other things about this person besides that one moment. Because it's like, I mean, you of all people, we know this, like, defining any of us by our worst moment when we're in our late teens or early 20s, is there anybody in the world that wants to be defined that way forever, or have their entire life based upon that? So
Right.
that's the bill. And the victory, one of the big bills, but like the most glamorous, the most systemic change type of bill. And just yesterday, the first committee vote on that happened. And this is always a contentious issue, because when you have long sentences, that means you have serious crimes a long time ago. And this particular attorney general in Virginia right now is very against anybody who's ever had a long sentence getting out earlier, or earning it even. And that's okay. We're trying to find common ground. That's absolutely what we're trying to do. But at this moment, what happened is a bunch of people were brought in, and there was a back and forth in terms of testimony that was, and like we've said, like, it is a nuanced issue, and we feel empathy for all victims of all crimes. And I
Right.
think most people locked up do too as well.
Right.
And it's just a matter of how do we approach using that empathy to make ourselves better. And
Right.
so, but in the middle of all this, Ray Cousins, who I mentioned earlier, Delegate Cousins, who's the sponsor of this bill, she stood there and she stood on principle, and she heard people really trashing her as a human being, even though she was trying to do something that was going to help her community and help encourage rehabilitation. And she dealt with it with compassion. She was truly heroic. in standing and having to be the face of people attacking her for just wanting to give people second chances when they've earned them. And so she's actually going to be on, I just found out, and that was the thing I was alluding to earlier. She's actually going to join us this Sunday night. So if anyone wants to talk to one of the architects of systemic change, you know, pursuing systemic change in Virginia and having gotten this is the first time we've ever had a victory in a House subcommittee on this particular bill in Virginia, which is just one piece of the process, a long way from still being law. But it's a big thing, especially in the Deep South. Like let's be honest, this is where racism was built into the criminal justice system in the former capital of the Confederacy. And I'm not saying everybody who's a lawmaker that doesn't support this is racist. That's not my point. But my point is this is an equity thing. We are trying to undo the wrongs of our past or the excessive sentences of our past. And so for us to get that far right here is like a huge victory. And so we're just going to shout out to Delegate Cousins for being heroic. And actually, you know, we also Deeds on the other side is the Senate sponsor, and we'll be hearing that soon. So also a hero, and everybody who supported this is a hero. So it's not just Delegate Cousins, but she stood there and stood up on principle, but while still also honoring victims of all crimes, and regardless of whether they agreed with her. And so I just really want to shout out again to her for being a hero, and also for being willing to come speak to the impacted community on Sunday night directly. It shows that it's not just a matter of like politics for her. It's a matter of like, I care about this again on a human level.
And being accessible to the people as a public servant. Sometimes it's hard. But like you said, she sat there and she listened. A lot of people don't want to hear both sides of the conversation. And I think that's what is the value for me, what I see with the Humanization Project. And it's part of when you spoke about common ground, you spoke about a few minutes ago about the Attorney General not necessarily, you know, wanting to see specific things. And again, why it's important for common ground, you know, to be identified. What are some ways that the Humanization Project, I got to participate in something. I was glad to be able to participate in that. But what are some things and what are some ways that the Humanization Project, I say advocate, but again, I think you use the word amplify the voices. But what actually says elevating and amplifying impacted, I can read. Elevating and amplifying impacted voices. I don't have my glasses on, but what are some things that the Humanization Project does? Because I know people are now asking, and if you see me put it up, guys, follow the Humanization Project. And again, he said this Sunday, they're going to be up there. They're
every
up there
Sunday at 8.
Every Sunday at 8 p.m. So make sure you guys follow them on Facebook.
Except Super Bowl Sunday. We're going to do it that Saturday. We haven't picked a time yet because I want somebody to actually pay attention.
Yeah.
But usually Sundays at 8
Right.
during session. But other, you know, we do, the legislative stuff has become part of what we do because we actually initially wrote and spearheaded the passage of, and certainly it was not us alone, but we were the you know, the nexus of earned sentence credit expansion, which, if you recall, was, you know, kind of the first step in systemic change in Virginia. So we've done legislative stuff, and we always, but that's only part of what we do. The ultimate thing is, like you said, elevating and amplifying. That's actually the short version. Impacted voices and experiences in order to change the narrative and thereby create more compassionate policy. That's it. That's kind of the summary of all of it. And the point being that we want to come to every space with a human voice on the topic of justice. Sometimes that's educational projects. Like we've worked with some universities where we have people who are behind bars teach today's college students about the justice system from an impacted perspective. We have research elements where I'm a sociologist by training, so I still do some research and you know, basically try to contribute to the canon of knowledge in that sense, but also from a qualitative human perspective, like actually looking at the human beings in a more nuanced way than just some surveys. And then we have we have film festival coming up in April in Northern Virginia, the In Thrive Film Festival. That's films not always about the justice system, but every film is made by a justice impacted person to try to bring, like, show our art, our creative side, our other voices. We're putting on events. I'm on the New River Valley Reentry Council. We're doing some events to bring reentry awareness to kind of the human side of that, where there's going to be a film festival or a screening of a documentary called Voices of Reentry with a panels discussion around that coming up in April. Because like a lot of people think once, and you can speak to this, I know I can, I'm only 7 months out. Like getting out feels like when you're in, feels like, man, everything's going to be perfect as soon as I get out.
Yeah.
Right. Like that's just the beginning. And they drop you with about 100 things that you don't have any idea how to do as soon as you hit that door, and nobody's there to help you usually. I'm blessed to have, I have education, I have a support system that most people don't have, and I'm a white guy, so like among people who are impacted, I have more advantages, and it's still hard as hell every day, right? So like we're trying to basically just bring that, like, what is this like on a human level to every space. The legislative stuff gets the glory and gets the buzz. And yeah, you said shout out to SIP, shout out to Paul Taylor, shout out to Sheba Williams and No Left Turns, shout out to our friends at ACLU, FAM, Virginia Interfaith, and definitely shout out to the Humanization Projects team. Like we've got like 4 or 5 volunteers this in the last month, as we've started ramping up for all this. Like everybody contributes, and that's why elevating and amplifying impacted voices. That's why I include the amplifying, because I get to do this because we've established this little thing where a few people started paying attention, and we're networking and stuff. But it's not me speaking, it's me saying, let me collect everybody else, and because I have this platform, let me make what you're saying louder. Because most people don't have these resources, most people don't have the degrees, most people don't have the ability to comfortably connect with certain people. And so if I can do that, but with somebody else's message, that amplifies that message.
Right. I think that's key. There's power. I keep telling, but when you have a platform, you have the ability to influence. You have the ability to be heard, and there are voices that need to be heard. I know for me, there's louder voices around always. There's always somebody with this story. I know I met a guy. I think I might have told you, Taj. If not, speaking of Brother Willie, I met a guy. He did 2 years, and now he's a former prosecutor in Fulton County. I was like, yo. I met a guy. He was incarcerated. He's now Dr. Barber. And he's getting ready to do a whole housing thing with shipping containers for reentry, returning citizens. It makes the stuff I thought I was like, yo. So it's so key to anybody that's watching this. If you have a platform, if you have a voice, if you're good with social media, if you know how to, connect with people, help those that need to be heard get heard. Not just ones that are incarcerated. Yes, those too. But there's a lot of brothers and sisters out here. They don't know how to get their voice and their story out. You had me do like a 2-minute video, that project specifically. And what I appreciated, I think, I've done this, I think maybe with the SIP before, and slightly different, but I can only imagine, I'm not even talking about my video, but that right video coming across that right set of ears. It's just that moment where something shifts. In regards to you spoke briefly, and I don't want to go down, into the incarceration, everything. We both experienced that. But what was the light switch, or what was that moment where you were like, you know what, I'm gonna do this. This is gonna be, I'm gonna pursue, making a change or doing my part to do so. I always gotta ask the advocates that.
Mine is a little slightly different path. I mean, everybody's is unique, but mine is maybe a little atypical, because I was a professor before already, and I'm a criminologist, a sociologist, but specifically a criminologist, and I was working on equity and drug policy, but from a research and teaching perspective primarily. But I like to be hands-on. I like to go show up and support things that were going on, but I wasn't in the weeds with it, and then ended up incarcerated. Not the point of the story here.
Right.
There's some bullshit. Everybody, like, not the point. But in that process, I ended up, because I had this life that I'd built, and I did not think I was in any danger of getting incarcerated at this point in my time. I did not think I was doing, and so it was very shocking having built that life. And I thought I was being a good person, I thought. And well, the prosecutors disagreed and the local cops, but that's another story, right? But anyway, I was just utterly depressed. And then they weaponized solitary against me, and at the jail, without any infractions, they put me in solitary, period, from day one until until they coerced a plea deal out of me. Basically, 10 months later, they got the plea deal, and they kept me there for 14 months straight. And I was just, for the first time in my life, I was and repeatedly suicidal. That solitary stuff is no joke. And that was another one of our victories. That was actually this morning. We had our first victory on the solitary bill that I helped author. That should make a big difference in that regard, because there it is, HB 1244. Yeah, it was a big deal. So check out some of our posts about that. And if you want to support that, please, we got all sorts of instructions how to do that. We got another vote on that coming up tomorrow. But it really, like, I was just a hot mess, man. And I never imagined life so low. And when I got transferred over to DOC, I was still that low. It was a little bit better because I was out of solitary, but like, I was still like, I did not know that, I did not think anything was left in life, even once I did get out. Absurd and, you know, incalculable in my mind amount of time later. And I read this book called Man's Search for Meaning. Have you ever heard of that, by Viktor Frankl?
No.
It's literally like this big, and it's only like 145 or 155 pages, and like tiny pages. And he was a child that survived the Holocaust. He was in concentration camps and survived, which is, it's a miracle already. But he came to the States and became a world-renowned psychologist. And he always spoke of basically that, and I'm paraphrasing here, but if with a why, man can handle any how. Like, basically, that if you have a reason to keep going, that, and he saw this in the concentration camps, that if you have something that you're doing that gives you motivation, that makes you feel purpose, you will be able to survive just about anything. And that really resonated with me when I was real low. And so I was like, look, two things, that and family, right? And so I didn't want to let my family down. I wanted to prove to them that I was not, you know, the person that was depressed, or even and certainly not the person that had gotten, you know, put in prison. I was the person that they loved and, you know, and appreciated. And so I had to do something in that regard. And I realized after reading that book and with their support that if I just started finding something to try to help, and I was like, I've already like to help this situation, maybe, and going back to what I said at the beginning, as I was watching my family change their perspective based upon the humanization, I was like, well, maybe I can do that and make that my purpose. And man, at Greensville, I don't know if you were ever at Greensville, but like, that place is like, nothing gets done, right? Like, this is like the capital of ineptitude and laziness in all of America.
6
right?
years.
Like, yeah, I did 4.5 there. Like, you can't get in trouble unless you try to, because nobody wants to do nothing. And it's not like being up in the mountains where a bunch of people are trying to say some racist shit and beat you up, but it's a different kind of crap. Right.
Yeah.
And it's chaos.
Yeah.
And so, like, but I could kind of do my thing and not be bothered about that, but I didn't have much of a voice at that point. So I just started talking to people and trying to, like, see if I write this person, write that person. And then one little project got into another little project. And then next thing you know, we were like, well, what is the common thread here? We're humanizing. Jen, my fiance, the most amazing woman in the world, who was a very, very close friend for 16 years before we got together while I was at Greensville. She's just amazing. And none of this would have happened without her support, because she provided that, not just the reinforcement that I was doing something good. My family did too, all of them, but like, moment to moment, she helped me do these things. And she was the one who made it something on the outside, not just me trying to write letters from inside. And and then they're all humanizing. And so we're like, well, it's got a name. It's the Humanization Project. And then Don Scott got elected, and he had been incarcerated. And so we're like, hey, maybe we could talk with him, and maybe he'd be interested in adopting. And he's now the Speaker of the House 4 years later. And his signature bill was the earned sentence credit bill, which was what we brought to him, and he adopted right out the gate. And it was just perfect timing on everybody's part. And by no means am I trying to take credit for his success, but we rose together. And there was a lot of things that he did great separate from that. And I'm not saying this was the main thing, but this was part of it. And he got a lot of acclaim for making some systemic change. And I will say, I don't know if you heard this, but just a few months ago, they announced that 4 prisons are permanently closing in Virginia, which has happened never. Yeah. And that's systemic change. And it was a direct result of a number of reforms that happened in the last few years here. But like, the one that emptied the numbers first was earned sentence credits. Like, the prison population in Virginia is now permanently lower than it was because of that. And
drastically. And I
Yeah.
can I just
So
say this? Can I just say? And then I just want to be. I remember for years, a year after year after year after year, they kept saying you'd hear rumors about something on the General Assembly floor. Nothing ever changed, and then all of a sudden, you just started hearing it was like a door just opened, and that's all I just wanted to say. A lot of guys made it home.
yeah, but we got to keep going because systemic change, like when you're
Yeah,
into this space or when you're a sociologist like I am in the other space, systemic change is like that is the ultimate goal, right? It's the thing that most people think that you could never achieve, and we did it, but we did it like that. It's 12% lower,
right,
right? That's awesome, but that still leaves 25,000 people, most of them whom have earned some sort of second chance, and they're not quite getting it yet. And
right.
so we got to keep going. And that's where that second look comes in. That's systemic change on a bigger scale. And we're going to keep pushing. But like, yeah, but it was that moment where I realized that book, that purpose was the key. And once I found my purpose,
Sense.
it reinforced.
Yeah.
Like now I felt like I was doing something. So now I wanted to do more. Right. And I think, and actually that was the research I did at Greensville was the positive leaders that inspired me there who'd been down a while. You probably know some of them.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Lord Prince.
Yep.
You probably know him.
Yep.
And especially if you were 6 years at Greensville, there's probably a lot of overlap for some of those people. I'm going to shout them all out, but just without a list of names, shout all my homies out at Greensville. But
Right.
uh, at the same time, like that, it was those people inspired me. So I did interviews with them, and what I learned was not what I expected to learn. It was that it wasn't a particular spirituality or even having a religious faith, which it was often part of their lives, and family was huge in everybody's life who was a positive leader despite being incarcerated. But they all had something that was purposeful that drove them, even if they had long sentences. And so I was like, there is something here. And so now I preach, like, if you want to get through this situation as best you can, find something that makes you feel meaningful anyway.
Yeah, I concur. Having traveled similar roads and having similar thoughts, that's something that has definitely kept me going, having a purpose. And shout out to the significant others, the spouses, the fiance, my wife. I had when you were speaking about your situation, similar with mine. My wife now, she was the one that she helped me actually put things into motion. It was not just talk, and I was reaching outside the gate. So yeah, man, shout out to those that are definitely holding us down, supporting us. The moms, dads, brothers, sisters, spouses, and everybody else. Rashid Shabazz says they're going to have a third look because the second look is not going to cover everyone. The first look didn't even matter because we was looked upon as stock and not human beings. That's right. Oh, Rashid Shabazz. How you doing, good brother? One thing I wanted to ask, I always ask anybody that's in the fight, one of the good guys, to anybody that may come across this show, this conversation that is not necessarily involved or active when it comes to advocacy for their loved one or for second chance, etc. What are some words that you would tell them as to why they should, or if not that, maybe you want to say maybe there's something you've learned along your path of advocating or anything. But this is your time just to, I guess, give out a jewel or two.
One of the things that really struck me, I was already an advocate, like I said, but so it wasn't convincing me that there were decent people behind bars. But one thing that I understood is being at Greensville, looking like this, showing up at a place that, is a gang hotspot. Um,
Oh yeah.
right. And I had no problem because what I learned was that if you treat people with respect, come at them with genuine respect, no matter who they are, no matter what mistake they may have made at some point in their life, 95% of people, even in prison, will treat you with respect back. Like, if it's fake respect, no. If people see you fronting, no. Like, if I had gone in and tried to be hard and act like I was this tough dude, it would not have gone well. But I was just respectful and polite and kind and generous. Like, I was who I am to people. And even like across all communities, from the Muslim communities to NGE to like Bloods to like, I mean, just you name it. I'm from a Jewish family, and I had Aryan Brotherhood people who were like, I mean, and you know how it goes inside. People have affiliations, they don't even really represent the values they're supposed to and all that. But my point is, all that went aside. Every preconceived notion went aside. I'm not, by no means am I saying Aryan Brotherhood's okay, but my point is, all the bullshit went away just by being respectful to people. And that was a real lesson, because, like, I mean, these are people who in many cases really genuinely had done something at one point in their life that was truly terrible. Most people have, but it didn't matter. We could all be decent to each other. And that's a really important thing to remember, I think, for anybody who's not in this space, is that everybody has done something terrible, but also everybody, no matter what you think you know about them, if you come at them as a human being without any preconceived notions and just treat them like you would want to be treated, they will receive that. The subtle things, the body language, the things we read without knowing we're reading. People, if you're sincere, you will be treated sincerely back. And that's an important thing. And the other thing that I think, for people who, I just read some interesting research. 1 out of every 2 people in America has had a significant other or immediate family member. So not just like a third cousin, but like a mother, father, sister, brother, child, or spouse incarcerated for at least a year or more. So
One out of every two.
half of America has been and every single person who is impacted, who is incarcerated, their whole family is incarcerated with them, right? So that means 1 out of every 2 people had their life literally changed by incarceration of either themselves or somebody that they love dearly. So this impacts half the country. That's 180 million people. I'm sorry, 167 million people. Poor math on my part, but regardless, like, that's a lot of people. So when we think that this doesn't affect us, even if it's not, even if you were one of the 2 that it's not, that means almost everybody you know, and we don't talk about it a lot, but it means it's something we should all consider. Because when we make assumptions about what this means, or we make assumptions that it's easy for people, or we make assumptions that people are going to be able to do things like without having to be restricted in whatever capacity because of something on their record, it's probably not true. That's an important thing to, like, this is something that impacts all of our communities, not just what we call marginalized communities. All over the place, this matters.
It has to. If it's 1 out of every 2, then that's definitely, yeah. What's funny, before I bring it, that was me too. I was the inmate advisor. I was the IRG. I was the guy that could talk to everybody. I didn't, I would get in. You're in prison, you're in jail, you're gonna fight. But I wasn't the guy. No, it's like you said, 95% of the people, man. It's just respect. And what I just heard, another word for respect, when you treat people with respect, you treat them like a human. So shout out to you, Taj. That's the comment there. Humanization project. I see it. And I did not know you were in Greensville for that long, man. We definitely, man, Greensville. Whew.
8 building even.
I
was
was
in 8 buildings for 4.5 years.
I was in 9 building and 8 building. I was over there when they redid the what they do, the ACs, or they took the windows out, closed the windows up. That's when I was up there.
I moved into 8 building when they reopened it after that. I was the first people entering that building again. We must have been right next to each other. I didn't even realize it.
Small world, man. Small world. I know we'll chop it up again. And actually, I'm not gonna. I might actually, if I want to put you on the spot, I'm doing a panel about the effects of solitary confinement. I did over 3 years. Suicide, depression, PTSD, all these things. So, just extending that out there. You don't have to respond now, but hey, maybe you'd like to be a part of that, just to speak on your personal experience and the impact of that as well, because I know you're doing work over there too. Thank you. Salute to you, Taj, and the Humanization Project. Everybody, all the volunteers that are connected to all the organizations, all the advocates, everybody that we did not mention, because I started thinking about Shanoa, and I feel like she would have booted me in the side of the head. I got to shout out Sis
No,
right
I
there.
want some Noah.
Nah, gotta shout out Shanoa, man. Shout out brother Willie. Shout out everybody. Sincere, but again, man, don't underestimate your part. Even if you're not a quote unquote face that's out front or being seen, please don't underestimate the part that you play. It could be a letter, email, it could be anything, man. It all adds up. And that's it, man. Till next time, our next guest is gonna be formerly incarcerated person is going to be somebody that's going to speak specifically about their journey after coming home from 27 years and what it was like reacclimating back into society. So until next time, I see the questions. Oh, you want to answer these questions in 30 seconds? Hold
Sure.
on, real quick. We're going to answer these questions and then we're going to hop off, guys. We all it says, is it true that the earned sentence credit law goes back to what it was before Youngkin's budget bill?
So the attempt by the Attorney General to put a version in that would make that permanent, we killed that last week. That is gone. It will not be permanent. There is still going to be his attempt to put it back into another budget, but based upon the conversations we have had, the Democratic leadership is determined to not allow that to be the case. Now, you never know what happens in politics, and I am certainly not going to be able to influence them in the final moments of that decision directly, but we are optimistic that we will be able to defeat that being in the budget again. And we already defeated the permanent bill for sure. That is not happening this year.
For sure. That's progress. Man, progress to me, if anybody hasn't been dealing with the system, again, I got incarcerated in 2003, and I can tell you it was at a standstill for years, and it felt like nothing was ever going to shift. Other than that, Rashid Shabazz, he said he would love to be a part. Rashid, he said he did over 5 years. We're going to definitely get you in there, brother, if you want to hop up there to be a voice in the conversation. And before I hop off, guys, make sure you follow Taj and the Humanization Project on Facebook. And remember, they're live every Sunday at 8 p.m. with the exception of the Super Bowl, which hopefully the Kansas City Chiefs don't win. And that's about it, man. Until the Bears can get in there, we're going to root for San Francisco. Somebody said peace, free divine truth. They're saying free their brothers, man. All right, y'all. Till next time, Taj, thank you for joining us, and we'll catch up with you. Peace.
Thank you very much.